Part 44. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 432. Half an hour later, Greed huddled in the hot spring, shivering. Although the fish brain brought him a large amount of spiritual energy and a small amount of life energy, it was obvious that the heat converted into this life energy was not enough to keep him warm. Ah sneeze. Ah sneeze. Ah sneeze. Gretel, are you feeling better now? Cyrilla shrank listlessly on the other side. Ugh, it's all her fault. If only she didn't catch that big fish back, or let Gretel eat the fish brains. Or, when she first controlled the water wall, she shouldn't have sprayed so much cold breath. Let me soak for a while longer. Gretel shrank down again. Let me soak for a while longer, and when I get warm, I will start grilling the fish for you. Ah sneeze. I don't want to eat it. The silver dragon girl stamped her feet. With a boom, water splashed everywhere, like a small bomb exploding in a hot spring pool. Gretel, give yourself a shot to remove the disease. I haven't learned yet, Aji. The tragedy of Gretel was that he advanced to the 5th level in too short a time, and the priest's spells were not like the wizard's magic, so he had a lot of ready-made information to memorize. After advancing, he focused most of his energy on treating barbarians and studying electrocardiogram magic. Remove disease, a commonly used 3rd-level healing magic, he does not know. Okay then, the silver dragon girl muttered in annoyance. Get up quickly, get dressed, and I'll take you back. Ask Ant to give you a massage. What about the fish? Don't eat it. The fish they grew up in has been dead for 12 hours, lying straight on the stone with all its blood drained. The incident happened suddenly. Cyrilla did not freeze it with ice breath, and the picky MS silver dragon refused to eat stale fish. Half an hour later, Greed was fully dressed and once again hung under the claws of the silver dragon, shuttled through the sky. The silver dragon's wings flapped, and Greed swung and swung underneath, all the way back to the dragon's nest. A sneeze. A sneeze. A sneeze. Damn it, I have a bad cold again. Obviously, when a person catches a cold and should try to avoid the wind, flying by plane has incomparable advantages over being grabbed by a dragon. MS Silver Dragon treated him very gently, and even provided study guidance on removing disease. However, she had no immediate solution to the problem that Greed's mage level could not be advanced and she could not control the ECG magic. Ophelia's suggestion is to either wait for the natural growth of magic ability, or strengthen spell practice, or otherwise, why don't you contract a magic pet? A magic pet can share the mental pressure of the owner and help control it. Some magic pets can also provide some additional abilities. Speaking of which, the council is so concerned about you that they haven't even helped you find a magic pet. Pet, it's quite strange. She clicked her tongue in surprise. Greed blinked, embarrassed to say that he didn't want familiars, the common familiars in the Parliament's general exchange list, such as bats, cats, falcons, lizards, owls, and mice. Ravens, snakes, toads, etc., he is not very interested. It's weak, dirty, and disgusting. It takes time for him to feed it, and it also takes time for him to take care of it. He really wants someone like Mr. Trochka, who can be big or small, can talk, shapeshift, and has incredible fighting power. Where can I find one? However, the Dragon Clan is relatively well informed. Gretel took the opportunity to consult her. Madam, I really want to contract a magic pet. However, none of the common ones meet my needs. In addition, I want to contract an incorporeal body that can enter the human body without harm, explore the situation, and let me share it. It's vision, ma'am. With your insight, can you guide me? This. Ophelia held her chin in thought. Contracting an incorporeal body is not a difficult requirement for the Dragon Clan, but it is too difficult for Gretel. Most of the incorporeal bodies, such as ghosts and banshees are too powerful. If you contract with them, you still don't know who is contracting with whom. Besides, even weak enough incorporeal bodies naturally carry negative energy. This kind of infirmity will cause harm to a healthy person, but will it enter and exit a patient's body? That's a rhythm that's going to kill people. Ms. Silver Dragon thought one by one. Ghosts, no. Resentful souls, no. Bound spirits, no. The kind of soul that has been purified of grievances, yes, but it can be encountered but cannot be sought. Resentments dissipate and wishes are fulfilled, but a soul that does not dissipate can persist, too little. Or, ancestral spirits? Sacrifice to the spirit? She turned her thoughtful eyes and looked at the barbarian who was chopping fish meat beside her. Greed persuaded Sarah to freeze the big fish, put it in the space bag and brought it back. The big fish has been dead for a long time and has not been preserved. The silver dragon girl thinks it is stale and looks down on it. But the barbarians are all happy. What great food! What a powerful force! If you eat this batch, the warriors in the tribe will have several breakthroughs and advanced levels. Perhaps the answer you are looking for is with them. Ophelia pointed in the direction of Elder Gus Han. I heard that the barbarians believed in ancestors, natural spirits, and mountains and vegetation. They made contracts with them, provided sacrifices, and borrowed their power. When I was a boy, I once saw totems at the entrance of their villages. The shadow perched on the pillar, I just don't know if such an existence can be granted to outsiders. When the barbarian elder saw her gesture, he immediately put down what he was holding, walked quickly, and stood still to listen. After Ophelia finished speaking, he immediately followed up with a respectful voice. Of course this is not possible in normal times. There is only such a guardian spirit in a village, which is very precious and takes a long time to cultivate. However, life in the wilderness is difficult, and some small villages and tribes will always disappear, and if their guardian spirits, if it is preserved by a large tribe, it will be used as a suitable resource and can be exchanged at the right time. The old man bowed respectfully. With his white beard fluttering, he looked at Greed with eyes filled with gratitude and expectation. This kind of exchange often appears at annual gatherings. Warriors who win the first place in competitions and spellcasters who are admired by all the elders, even outsiders, may obtain such gifts. Sir, at the annual gathering it's the end of autumn and the beginning of winter, and it will be here in just over a month. If you are interested, we are willing to show you the way. Then what are you waiting for? Before Gretel could answer, Cyrilla had already jumped up, eager to try. Go. Greet, you go, and I'll go too. Let's pick a good one. Best-selling selections are changed at 2 p.m. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I've already posted the explosive chapter early in the morning. The editor made a mistake. I'm crying. I'm coding. I'll try to post 2 more chapters before I go to bed tonight. I'm asking for monthly tickets, recommendation votes, book reviews, and all kinds of things. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 433. The barbarian tribal gathering, also known as Akula, is usually held in late autumn and early winter. At this time, the road is dry, the water level is low, and the animals on land and in the water have accumulated enough fat. It is the time to hold a feast. Of course, the powerful tribe that serves as the host has stocked up on food to entertain guests within a radius of hundreds of miles. Not all tribes came. But centered on a certain point, within a radius of several miles, all the tribes that can come will try their best to come and participate in this annual grand gathering of competitions, blind dates, and transactions. Warriors compete, show off their strength, and win the hearts of beautiful women. Unmarried young women are looking for their favorite partners, Spellcasters exchange and learn various skills, and the leaders discuss conquering a powerful monster, or start a war. Every village or tribe that is in decent condition attaches great importance to this gathering. Although there is still more than a month, in fact, time is already very tight. It would take half a month just to walk from Elder Gushan's village. So, we have to walk for so long. Sirara sat cross-legged on the caravan, mumbling as the car swayed, with boredom written all over her face. Look to the left, there are luxuriant grasses, look to the right, there are luxuriant grasses. Greet decided to go with Elder Gushan and the others, so she plundered several books from her aunt's collection and joined the team. The first 2 days went well, there were many new patients to treat, and many new treatment techniques to see, but after setting off, just boring. Greet, let's go back. Wouldn't it be better to continue reading at Auntie's place? Cyrilla pouted and complained. When they are almost here, I will fly you here. How convenient. Why do you have to go with them? Because we have to do an experiment, Gretel reassured her with a smile. On the floor of the caravan in front of him, there was a rabbit tied to 4 green vines, with its legs in the air. The hair on the chest, abdomen, and thighs was all shaved clean. How could this kind of experiment of inserting silver wires and vines into the heart of a rabbit, and occasionally using a knife to dissect it, be done in front of MS Silver Dragon? The more tolerant others are and the less likely they are to criticize others when doing things on their own. Besides, catching rabbits in this wilderness is more convenient than a dragon's nest. Gretel sat cross-legged in front of the rabbit. He closed his eyes slightly, and the vines on his fingertips kept shaking, drilling into the rabbit's body along the femoral artery. While guiding the vines, observe the position of the silver wire next to the vines under the X-ray of detection magic, and at the same time let go of your mind and feel the condition of the rabbit. Ouch! Huge fear came over me. In an instant, Greet's heartbeat accelerated, her hands were covered in cold sweat, and her face turned pale. He was confused, all the vines suddenly disappeared, the rabbit jumped up, and the silver thread directly tore the femoral artery. Gretel! Cyrilla exclaimed. She pounced forward, grabbed the rabbit with her left hand, and pressed the healing technique on her right hand. Before touching the rabbit's body, a burst of bright red blood covered her face. Don't worry. Gretel got out of the state of shock and immediately moved forward. He grabbed the rabbit's right leg with his left hand, and pressed it accurately with his right hand, pressing the proximal end of the femoral artery bleeding point. Then, he raised his left hand, moved it quickly, and pressed the white light on the bleeding point. With each breath, the arteries and blood vessels stretched by the silver wire seemed to be smoothed by an invisible hand. Shrink, heal, and return to its original shape without leaving any trace of injury. Cyrilla's eyes widened, she raised her face and opened her lips into an O shape. Damn it! You just used one to treat minor injuries. Ah, here's a little trick. Gretel calmed down from the fear of being infected, smiled, and pointed to the rabbit's femoral artery. When you see bleeding, your first reaction should be to stop the bleeding. Pounce on it, hold the hemostasis point, and then use the healing technique or other methods. The consumption is very small. But Cyrilla wiped the blood on her face, sighed, and quickly cast herself a cleansing spell. What should I do if I can't react? Then practice more. I used to. How was it before? Cyrilla asked. Seeing Gretel smiling and not answering, he simply recognized the hands of 2 mages and shook him. How was it before? Tell me. Nothing happened, it was the first time I came on stage as an assistant, and I was sprayed with blood all over my face. I stepped back, and the teacher scolded me out of the operating room. At that time, I was still aggrieved, saying that I was afraid of infection, and the teacher said, "You deserve it, who told you not to wear goggles?" Gretel chuckled. The smile is both nostalgic and warm. I found out later. When I see the bleeding, I press it with gauze as soon as possible, and then use a suction device to suck it away. Next, whether it's suturing or electric cautery to stop the bleeding, the teacher will take care of it anyway. Practice a few more times and get rid of it. Once the instinctive reaction is eliminated, the habit will become natural. Are surgeons afraid of blood? Afraid? Why not? Ordinary bleeding is not something to be afraid of, but unexpected heavy bleeding spurts all over the face, spraying onto the shadowless lamp and onto the ceiling of the operating room. No matter how many gauze blocks are used to stop it, after one operation, both feet are completely intact. Stepping in blood. How could you not be afraid? But for a moment of panic or relaxation, the price paid may be the patient's life. Therefore, all fears must be forgotten and all instincts must be suppressed. Concentrate, stay calm, and take all actions to achieve the only set goal. Treat. Treat. He cured the rabbit, pressed it against the carriage board, and tied it up with vines again. Breathe evenly, calm down, and for the nth time, open your mind and observe the rabbit's condition. A servant of nature, the ability to communicate with animals is a blessing and a constraint. When you can feel its fear, sorrow, and pain, when you can feel its little heart beating fiercely, making its last struggle in the face of death. Among nature's servants, few can do it. Of course, in order to obtain food and fur to keep out the cold, the worshippers of the god of nature can still choose to hunt animals. At this time, they often turn off their perception. But not Gretel. He must communicate with animals and understand all their reactions while shielding themselves from emotional impact, cold, hunger, pain, difficulty breathing, nausea and making you want to vomit, itching all over your body. Not only do you have to do it when you are quiet, but you also have to do it during surgery. Greet has been practicing this skill for a long, long time. He was able to communicate in a calm state, but in the surgical state, as soon as he relaxed his mind, he would immediately disconnect. The 23rd experiment failed. However, I lasted half a second longer than before. Gretel, come on. Best-selling selections are changed at 2 p.m. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I've already posted the explosive chapter early in the morning. The editor made a mistake. I'm crying. I'm coding. I'm coding. I've already coded 3 chapters today. I'll code out another chapter as soon as possible. I'm asking for monthly tickets, recommendation votes, book reviews, and all kinds of things. Thanks to @typing Tiang Tiang Zia Typing, @Wang Xiao Xiang 1115 for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. Please use the web page as much as possible to reward Apple mobile phones. Otherwise, nearly half of the money will be deducted through channels, and it will be 3 months late. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jialan 2020. Chapter 434. The boring problem that Sarala complained about was solved after 2 days. It's not that Gretel's skills have improved by leaps and bounds or made significant progress. In fact, the level of his communication with animals went from 0.5 seconds, to 1 second, to 1.5 seconds, to 2 seconds, and then got stuck. Or, the mental impact was too great and he was directly knocked out of the spellcasting state. Or, under extreme fear and pain, the heartbeat is racing, the blood pressure is soaring, the whole person is shaking, and Sarala is knocked out of the spellcasting state. Whether it's a magical attack or a physical attack, in short, relying on Gretel's current ability to communicate with animals, it may be impossible to conduct research smoothly for the time being. Fortunately, after 2 days' drive, the team of Elder Gushan met up with a large team of people from another village. In the wilderness, Cattle neighed, horses croaked, wheels rumbled, and the savages talked and laughed loudly, making the sky full of noise. After chatting for a long time, Elder Gushan took the elder and leader of the village and came over to introduce Gretel. "Well, Gretel, this is the leader of Redstone Village, White Wolf Wolfgen. This old guy, Hunchback Whitefin, is the spellcaster of their village. Hunchback, this is Gretel Nordmark, a servant of the god of nature, a young genius healer." Greet quickly jumped down from the caravan and saluted them one by one. White Wolf, as the name suggests, Wolfgen people are tall and tall, carrying a huge sword and covered with a white wolf skin. The wolf's mouth was open, its upper jaw was resting on top of his head, and its hind feet had just touched the ground. It was obvious that it was also a giant wolf in life. The wolf looked at Gretel with dark eyes and sharp teeth, which was quite scary. Greet only glanced at him, then turned his head and looked at the other person. Hunchback, there is a high bulge on the back of Whitefin's left spine. His left shoulder is high and his right shoulder is low. As a result, his whole body is slightly tilted to the right. Trembling and holding a long white bone staff, Gretel glanced at him and muttered in his mind. Scoliosis, fibroma, lipoma, hemangioma. Despite the murmuring, there was still no abnormality on his face, his eyes were clear and his expression was calm. Elder Gushan pulled the hunchback, pointed at Gretel and babbled. "I fell ill at sea a few days ago and had a terrible stomachache. He cured me. Not only was he cured, he also said that there were worms in my bile. When I took out the bile, it was true. Then, he said that many people in our village had bugs in their stomachs, and they studied a method and cured us all." Gretel gave them a smile befitting his age. Being in the north, it was hard to wear linen robes, it was cold, and the oak staff, I took out the oak staff quickly, swung it in the wind, and turned it into an eyebrow-level stick, leaning on the ground. I don't usually use this thing, so it's really hard to think of it. Seeing the 5 green leaves on the head of the stick, the expressions of the white wolf and the hunchback instantly became friendly. The hunchback held a bone staff in one hand, and stretched out his other hand to shake hands with Gretel, even bending his waist and liver. "Mr. Nordmark, it's an honor to meet you. Please take care of me along the way. My abilities are limited. If there are any injuries in the team, I have to trouble you to take action. Hey, you are an experienced elder, I want to ask you for advice." After the business exchange ended, Elder Gushan cautiously introduced Sirara, saying only that she was an elf who traveled to the north and was traveling with Gretel. After chatting, the two parties parted ways. Sirara watched them walk away from a distance. She probably couldn't hear the conversation anymore. She turned around and caught Gretel. "Gretel, what's going on with that hunchback? Have you ever seen this kind of thing? Can you cure it?" She spoke quickly, and a series of questions came out in rapid succession. Before the first one had time to answer, the next one had already followed immediately. Greet wanted to answer at first, but then simply shut up. When Sirara finished asking the question in one breath, she smiled bitterly. "I don't know either." "How could you not know?" Sirala shouted all of a sudden. "How could Gretel not know? That girl who was pregnant with a ghost, the bug in the savage elder's guts, Gretel knew it just by looking at it and touching it." Her voice was so loud that the men and women around her, even White Wolf Wolfgen, who had already walked away, turned to look at them. Greet quickly pulled her back into the car and whispered, "I really don't know. I haven't checked it. Sirara, do you remember that before, I used magic to look and look again and again, and did it several times before I knew it? That elder, I only knew I shook hands with him and said a few words, how do I know what's going on with him?" "Oh, okay," Sirala pouted in disappointment. However, she soon became excited again, holding on to the shaft of the carriage to jump down. "Then I'll pull him over. Let you check him out? Then you'll know. Great. You also want to cure him, right? Do not. Gretel threw herself forward in the carriage and fell to the ground, finally catching her in time. He lay on the carriage board, stretched out his arms as hard as he could to grab Sarala's clothes, and said hurriedly, "If he wants to be cured, let him do it on his own. There is no reason to drag people away. Don't go." "Why?" Sarah relaxed her body and slowly sat back in the car. Her face was filled with doubts, and she looked up and down at Gretel as if she didn't recognize him. "Why don't you let me drag him here?" "Gretel, it's obvious that you never get bored every time you heal someone. But that also requires the patient to want to be treated." Greet climbed up from the carriage board, took 2 steps back to make room for her, and sat cross-legged. "Seek medical treatment. You have to ask for medical treatment. Doctors cannot come to your door rashly." Dalala asked, "You are sick, do you want me to treat you?" Seeing that Sarala still looked confused, Greet thought for a while and said seriously, "Salara, we healers provide help to patients, but never use our will to replace their will. They need to make the final decision whether they want to be treated or not, what treatment method to use, and how much to spend. The body, it belongs to them, and we cannot make decisions for them." "But we are helping them," Sarala said anxiously. She looked serious and a little aggrieved. How could it be wrong to help others? Medical ethics is really difficult to explain to a silver dragon from another world. Gretel pondered for a moment. "For example, Sarala, there is a king who is seriously ill and wants to live. There is no other way to save him but to resort to the great wishing spell, but the cost of the wishing spell must be his. His family, his wife, and children, all his citizens were sold into slavery. So, if he gives up treatment at this time, can we forcefully activate the Great Wish technique and then ask him for money? Well. So, in reality, the medical methods we adopt are actually like this." Greet lowered his head and used Mage's trick to draw a circle on the floor of the carriage. "This is the best medical treatment for this kind of injury, a red circle. This is the medical method that I, as a healer, can use. Of course I can't do those high-level treatments, a yellow circle. Then this one is the medical method the patient wants to adopt based on his wishes and abilities, a green circle. The 3 circles are in the same shape, and the very small part where the 3 overlap is painted in eye-catching black by Greet. You see, this part is what we can actually do. It's so troublesome." Sarala slowly lowered her head. Greet also sighed secretly. In reality, there are too few things doctors can do. Even, sometimes, the 3 large circles cannot be merged together at all. As a doctor back then, all he could do was study and research as hard as he could to expand his scope of abilities. Then, I look up to the leaders and researchers in various fields, hoping that they will expand the scope of treatment methods just a little bit more." The carriage was silent for a moment. Sarala looked down at the small piece in the center of the 3 large circles, and her heart was filled with panic. I still wanted to say a few words, but very far outside the carriage, a shout suddenly burst out. "Elder! Elder, what's wrong with you? Elder Gus Han! Help!" Greet suddenly pushed against the wall, jumped out of the carriage, and ran out without looking back. "And you still want people to come to the door themselves? There is really not a drop left. I slept. Come back tomorrow to continue updating. There will be 2 updates guaranteed before the push is released at 2 p.m. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Forgotten Ocean, @Study and Farming just rewarded me with 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 435. Gretel didn't hear Sarah's muttering. Even if he heard it, he would just smile at most. Emergency first aid and outpatient medical care are different. Emergency first aid is to rush forward at full speed when you hear someone shouting for help. What is the patient's wish? What else is there when the patient is unconscious? Save people first and then talk. With this idea in mind, Gretel pressed forward. The helpless man was short with short legs, and the physical level of a level 1 warrior was nothing compared to the barbarians present. When he rushed to the scene of the incident, a thick wall of people had been built in front of him, and the average altitude was nearly half a meter higher than Greet. "Give way! Give way!" Gretel could only shout, while standing on tiptoes. "I'm the healer. Let me in." After a few pulls, the effect was, not to mention not at all, it was better than nothing. After all, not all barbarians can speak common tongue, and Gretel has not yet learned the third-level Blarney skill, and language proficiency cannot be used as cabbage to the crowd. Greet hesitated for a moment, and just as he was about to throw barbarian bull power at himself, the silver dragon girl rushed in like a whirlwind. He grabbed the barbarian in front of him and dragged him to the side. The barbarian fell away without any resistance. Cyrilla rushed forward, just like Moses parting the Red Sea, while the barbarians on both sides staggered apart. The Greet faked long way and followed behind without any pressure. He walked directly to the center of the circle and lowered his head to take a look at the situation. "Stop! Don't touch him!" The old hunchback lay unconscious on the ground. His limbs twitched, his eyes rolled white, and he foamed at the mouth. At first glance, there are obvious symptoms of epilepsy. A boy in his early 10 years knelt beside him, crying "Teacher," and stuffed a long-handled spoon into the old man's mouth, and pried it hard. Gretel shouted out, and the young man seemed to be unaware, his hands not stopping at all. Next to him, White Wolf Wolfgen, the elder of Gushan, and 2 young warriors were busy pinching people and practicing healing skills. Only Elder Gushan raised his head and glanced at Gretel, obviously hesitating. "Do you want to listen to him? Stop! Don't touch him!" Cyrilla shouted after him. While shouting, he picked up Wolfgen and another soldier and threw them to both sides with 2 bangs. When I tried to pick up the boy again, I heard a scream. Ah! The screams were extremely ferocious. Even with the silver dragon girl's huge nerves, she couldn't help but pause on her hands. Looking down, the young man held up half the handle of the spoon, raised his head, and said with a sad face, "Teacher." The teacher swallowed the spoon. "So I ask you not to touch him." Greet was startled and quickly knelt down to check the situation. During an epileptic attack, the patient's biggest risk is suffocation, but nothing else matters. Therefore, the correct way to deal with it is to let the patient lie down, turn his head to one side, open the airway, so that saliva and vomit can flow out of the mouth without blocking the trachea, and then let him stay quiet and let him go. Go smoke. It usually takes about 5 minutes for the pain to subside by itself. As for biting off your tongue, it's really not that easy to bite your tongue off. Generally speaking, only a few milliliters of blood will come out. On the other hand, stuffing gauze, fingers, chopsticks, and spoons into the patient's mouth is more likely to cause suffocation even if it is not bitten and swallowed. Even if this is not the case, if the hard object breaks the mouth, the amount of bleeding will be greater. Please, stop promoting things like the patient had a seizure, a passerby stuffed his finger into his mouth, and was bitten until it was bloody, and the related most beautiful XXX stuff. Doctors have already worked very hard to popularize science. They cannot stand up to the fact that the media has no common sense and always conveys wrong perceptions to the public. Greet silently cursed. Above the head, the silver dragon girl and 2 barbarian warriors were shouting. "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Gretel said, "Don't touch him." You didn't hear it? If you don't touch him, you'll have to bite off your tongue. Bite. The silver dragon girl's voice was lowered, and she was obviously a little weak. However, after a pause, he immediately raised his head again, looking unreasonable and angry. So what if you bite off your tongue? Just pick it up. You don't have any healing skills. Besides, it's not that easy to bite off. If I tell you not to touch it, just don't touch it. It's fine now. You swallowed the spoon. You are very happy. Ah. Gretel had to give her a thumbs up. Sarala fought against many, making a huge noise, and several barbarians were actually suppressed by her. It would be great if there was such a doctor in the hospital in the previous life, or even such a head nurse. I thought too much. If there was such a head nurse, I would have to complain to the point of suspension. Fortunately, this is another world, and fortunately, the Silver Dragon girl's strength is enough to suppress the entire audience. Gretel was able to squat in the center of the typhoon's eye and check with peace of mind. By the way, where did the spoon go? Which narrow part have you passed? First. The second. The third. This is a spoon. Hard foreign body. Greet glanced at the boy's hand and clearly saw the broken stubble on the wooden handle of the spoon. Hell, there were also sharp broken thorns. It's okay if this thing is swallowed in the stomach, but if it gets stuck in the esophagus, it can really do 18 different tricks for you, and there will be no repetition. He hurriedly threw a language proficiency to the young man and asked anxiously. What material is the spoon made of? Bronze, copper with a wooden handle. The young man answered with a sad face. Gretel stopped talking, took out the endless ink pen, and raised it behind the old man's back with the hand of the mage. At the same time, he unbuttoned the old man's collar and touched all the strange ornaments from his neck to his chest. He lay down on the ground and tilted his head to look at hypopharynx. No, look further down, the clavicle, the first rib, the second rib. What is that oval-shaped thing behind the shadow of the second rib? Gretel crawled over to take a closer look. The front view shows an oval shadow, the lateral view shows a flat D shape. Judging from the position, it is near the second sternocostal joint. Greet suddenly started to sweat. That place is the aortic arch. The damn spoon also had a wooden handle. If the spoon was positioned too far in the esophagus, the wooden handle would pierce the esophagus and directly hit the aortic arch, with disastrous consequences. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Gretel tried to comfort himself. The spoon is made of wood, and the broken wooden handle is not very sharp, so it may not be able to puncture the esophagus. Besides, even if it is punctured, the outer wall of the aorta is very thick and powerful, and it can often bite the foreign object that penetrates. If you're lucky, you'll be saved in time, saved in time. Stop making noise, he raised his head and shouted. Sarala, clear the place. Elder Gus Han, come and help me. His spoon is stuck in the esophagus. Take it out quickly. If you are unlucky, your life will not be saved. If you have an epileptic seizure, please don't put anything in the patient's mouth. Please. Special thanks to the 5th leader of Riding Pig Tiger Lord. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. P.S. It seems that the new chapter cannot be posted at 2 o'clock, and I am still checking the paper. Thanks to Riding Pig Tiger for the 11,600 starting coins. Thanks to the 5th leader of this book. I will add 10 updates for you alone. From tomorrow on, I will add 1 update every day. Thanks to @bookfriend 2020501012542983 for the reward of 500 starting coins. Thanks to @blackglazejean for the 300 starting coins. Thanks I want to cultivation of immortal eye circles for the infinite reward of 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 436. Stuck in the esophagus. Elder Gus hand touched his neck hesitantly. When he tried to touch the old hunchback's neck again, Gretel stopped him. Stop touching it. It's stuck here on the chest, about level with the second rib. It's very deep and you can't touch it. Use detection magic to take a look. He knelt down on one knee and pointed out the position for Elder Gus Han. At the same time, he frowned and thought hard. How to check? How to ensure the safety of surgery? Esophageal foreign bodies, especially those stuck in the chest, are not difficult to remove. Even if Greet is not an otolaryngology doctor, he knows the general idea of operation. If there is no perforation, just use an esophagoscope, the otherworldly vine version of the god of nature, to properly remove it. Even if a foreign body in the esophagus pokes a hole in the esophagus, a hole can be made in the chest for thoracoscopic surgery, and a gastroscope can be used to remove the thing. What? A foreign object poked a hole in the aorta? Upper aortic stent graft, oh, alien vine version, aortic treatment. Or let the thoracoscope wait nearby, and once the esophageal foreign body is removed, the treatment will be done? It's not impossible to have it. However, all of this has a premise. Diagnosis. Esophageal foreign bodies, if they are simple in shape and regular in appearance, such as coins, can be diagnosed with plain X-rays. However, for esophageal foreign bodies with complex, irregular, and sharp shapes, especially those with the possibility of perforation, it is well known that the most reliable diagnostic method is CT. Only CT can clearly show the size, shape, and location of foreign bodies in the esophagus, and whether they have penetrated surrounding tissues, such as the trachea, aorta, etc., and, are there any complications, where is the perforation, where is the inflammation, where is the suppuration. In this regard, X-rays can only see flat surfaces. Barium cotton can easily hang on foreign objects and aggravate damage. By the way, Greet does not have barium cotton yet, and B ultrasound is not correct at all. Other inspection methods, bundled together, are not as effective as this one. But where can he find a CT machine? Greet thought hard. Looking sideways, Elder Gus Han had stood up, his face pale. Why is it stuck here? Can you take it out? Or, let him swallow it? You can't swallow it, Greet was startled. Don't give a rice ball or anything else. Let the patient chew it and try to swallow the foreign object together. He's stuck in a very dangerous position. Next to it is the largest blood vessel in the human body, which goes straight to the heart. If he moves even a little, the handle of the spoon pierces the esophagus and penetrates the blood vessel, and the whole person will be dead. What should we do? Elder Gus Han's forehead was dripping with cold sweat. If he encountered the situation alone, he would have to leave it to fate. Fortunately, Greet is here now. Your Excellency, you must save him. There is only one healer in Angshi village, Old Hunchback. If he dies and his apprentice is still young, the village will be in trouble. We live in the wilderness. Without a healer, there will be no casualties. How else are you going to live? Okay, don't worry, I will do my best. Greet supported him and comforted him. Then he turned his head. Cirella. Hey. What? You can help me keep an eye on the patient. If the condition suddenly worsens, I'll throw out the treatment. He pointed to the center of the old hunchback's sternum, which was at the same height as the second rib. Don't be stingy, lose the big one. I have something to think about. Okay, the silver dragon girl responded and wanted to squat down, then raised her head and glared at the white wolf opposite. Don't come over. White wolf. Wolfgen snorted coldly. He wanted to raise his fist to demonstrate, but then he hesitated after moving his arm. The opposite side is also an elf girl. Even though she had strange strength and could easily throw him away, she was still a petite and slender elf girl. Directly showing off force seems like bullying. As soon as he hesitated, a person came running over from the opposite side, and the ground shook. Bernard arranged the carriage and ran over to stand next to Gretel, taking the place of the silver dragon girl. "Look at the other side and puff out your chest," the boss said to clear the place, "then no one can disturb his treatment." In the tense silence, Greet thought quickly. He couldn't do a CT scan of the entire chest. The amount of calculations was too large and beyond his capabilities, but what about doing only one layer? The principle of CT is just to divide a flat floor into 64 grids or more. Then, according to the ability of different parts of the body to absorb X-rays, they are marked as high absorption areas, medium absorption areas, and low absorption areas. The radioactive source is then moved around the patient. Combine the received information and superimpose all points into a plane map. I don't need many images, I only need 2, 3, or at most 4 images, no larger than 10 times 10 cm. So, for the sake of the patient's life, can we manually record, manually calculate, and try it once? Walking through the path of our predecessors, after all, the earliest CT images were nothing more than this. He gritted his teeth and made up his mind. This situation is not serious, so take this opportunity to give it a try. Even if the diagnosis is wrong, he is confident that he can be saved. Even if he misses, there will be someone with Cyrilla beside him who will be able to deliver powerful healing. "Cyrilla, keep an eye on him," Greet whispered, rustling, and began to take out a pen and notebook. "I want to try a new diagnostic method. If successful, it should be able to save many more people." "Is there a new diagnostic method?" The silver dragon girl's eyes were bright. She nodded vigorously, squatted on the spot, and stared at the hunchbacked barbarian without blinking. Not long after, hunchback Whitefin moved and let out a painful groan. "Well, don't move. Don't move," Greet immediately jumped down nervously. The foreign body in the esophagus is close to the aortic arch. Clinically, this situation requires lying absolutely flat to prevent the foreign body from directly piercing the aorta with a little more force. But now, I have no choice but to make some changes. "Bernard, bring me a chair. One with a backrest." It's coming." Before Bernard could search all over the place, Elder Gushan gave the order, and a young man had already carried a wooden stool over and tied the wooden boards to the legs of the stool. According to Gretel's request, the height of the board was carefully adjusted so as not to interfere with the swelling on the old man's back. "Hell him up. Try to be as gentle as possible, don't let him exert any force, not even a little bit. Put him on the chair and let him sit up straight. Sit firmly, back straight, good. Cyrilla, confinement technique." Although spiral CT scans were done while lying down, Gretel thought to himself that since the endless ink pen could rotate around the old man, he couldn't lie down and spin facing the old man. As for lying under the old man, using magic power to control the patient to lie down and turn. Just think about it, I really don't look at the beauty of the painting. Forget it, let's just follow the approach of the first generation CT experiments and just let the patient sit down. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Kutanshari for the 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to @Yemengbing for the 500 starting coin reward. Thanks to @Mr. Crow 79 for the 100 starting coins reward. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 437. The old hunchback still fell into Gretel's hands. Strictly speaking, he remained in a state of confinement and was carried along with a chair into the refuge cabin released by Cyrilla. This magic consumes little and is very effective. The Council's advanced compulsory course, Third level magic has been reprinted over the years, and it is included in the recommended list every year. In Gretel's plan, the order of learning this magic is higher than flying and fireball, and it is almost the first sequence of third order magic. It's a pity that he hasn't advanced to the 5th level magician yet. For the time being, he can only let Sarala take on the construction work of the temporary operating room. Sarara summoned a floating saucer, and Bernard put the old hunchback on it with a chair, squatted on the edge, and slowly turned the floating saucer. The elder of Gus Han, the leader of Redstone Village White Wolf Wolfgen, was far away, far pressed against the wall of the hut. I dare not breathe. Gretel, on the other hand, was holding a thick hardcover book, sticking it to the edge of the floating saucer, mumbling, writing and drawing. High density shadow, medium density, low density, high, medium, high, low, turn it. Hey, you turned it too much, come back. Stop moving, I will continue, low, medium, high, medium. There were dense grids on the paper, and he filled them all out in a mess. After finishing one page, he drew another page. Soon, beads of sweat appeared on Gretel's forehead. Gretel! SHH! Greet stopped him without thinking. He wiped his forehead with his backhand, looked at the notebook in front of him with only 2 pages filled in, and sighed. So hard. Is it still too difficult to challenge computers with humans? But keep at it, Gretel. Exploding mushroom bombs is such an arduous project, it all relies on manpower and abacus, let alone the simplest CT. Persevere, summarize the formula, verify it, and then you can go back and hand it over to the tower spirit. Come on, Greet. He recorded paper after paper, angle after angle. Recording, summarizing, calculating, the poor old hunchback was imprisoned on the chair motionless, his face turned from red to white, from white to blue, and then from blue to red, but he couldn't scream. It was Gretel who noticed something strange about him, and asked Sarara to untie the shackles on his head and ask him, "What's wrong?" This and that. The old hunchback twisted his neck repeatedly, looking at the silver dragon girl one by one, but refused to say a word. Gretel suddenly realized. Sarala! You go out first. Why? Obey. You go out first, and then come back when I ask you to come in. Gretel winked fiercely as he spoke, his eyelids blinking so fast that they were about to twitch. Finally, Sarara reluctantly moved out of the refuge hut. The old hunchback finally breathed a sigh of relief and said hurriedly, "I can't hold it in anymore." Well, don't say I don't know how to release the confinement technique. Even if I know how to do it, if you run to the toilet and then come back, wouldn't the CT scan I did in front of you be in vain? Can you bear it? I can't bear it anymore. I'm really sorry for this. Greet shook off sweat. For this examination in the hospital in my previous life, the scanning time for head CT was only a few seconds, and for chest CT it was only 10 seconds. Even if it was enhanced CT and multiple parts were scanned at the same time, the combined time of getting on and off the examination bed would only be 20 seconds at most. Minutes or so. But what about myself now? It seems, like, almost an hour has passed. And I'm only halfway through recording? If you are not good at learning, you will feel ashamed. This thing can't be resisted. But let's just deal with it on the chair. Gretel is worried that Sarara will come back and smell the smell. If he doesn't kill the patient, he will kill him first. Forget it. He took out a seed and activated the power of nature. The green vines snaked like snakes, swimming toward the old hunchback and slipping into the magic prison. Soon, the old man shouted at the top of his lungs. "Don't come over here." Then, "I'm really sorry for this, I didn't want to. In the future, I will try to speed up the recording speed and remind patients to remember to use the toilet before doing CT." Not long after, Gretel quietly walked out of the refuge cabin carrying a bag wrapped in green leaves, and then quietly walked back. Stand back to your original position, concentrate, and engage in manual recording of CT signals again. After nearly another hour of busy work, the information from all directions was recorded. Greet squatted beside him, calculating for an unknown amount of time, and finally integrated all the records on a form. He then smeared the data in each square and manually drew a CT image. It seems there's still something wrong. Gretel frowned while holding the manual CT chart. Observed with the naked eye, meditation vision, and drawn by hand, the accuracy is really low. A deep and shallow, fuzzy grid looks like a heavy mosaic. It is really difficult to tell whether there is a perforation of the esophagus or damage to the aorta from the picture. Ugh, I really want to contract an incorporeal body as soon as possible. With the eyes of the incorporeal body, I can directly see the situation inside the body, and all CT and MRI can be put aside. Gretel, what's wrong? Sirara stretched her head over his shoulder. The picture Gretel drew by hand is a big circle with two bright shadows on the side and several groups of bright or dark shadows in the middle. Where is the trachea? Where are the blood vessels? Where is the spoon stuck in the esophagus that Greet mentioned? Well, you first need to have a concept of the anatomy of the human body. Gretel himself was confused when he saw the CT pictures for the first time. He could understand Miss Yinlong's confusion and explained it to her smoothly. Speak. This image is a horizontal diagram of a certain layer of the human body. You imagine cutting the human body horizontally and exposing a certain side. Imagine. Imagine. He broke out in a cold sweat and patted Cyrilla's eager palm. Although he knew that Silver Dragon was a good dragon and would not cut people open for no reason, he still felt a little frightened when he saw her making gestures like this. On this layer, looking from the back to the front, the back is the spine, the esophagus is forward, and the trachea is further forward. The blood vessels are attached to the trachea and esophagus. So it is very clear at a glance, the location of the esophagus. There is an extra shadow, protruding toward the blood vessels. Where? Well, actually I'm still not sure. This requires a 64-slice CT to scan clearly. In terms of accuracy, my meditation field of vision is probably not as good as even a single-row CT. Even with such terrible accuracy, Gretel reluctantly came to a conclusion. He took the hand-drawn CT chart, summoned Silent Phantom, and gestured to the old hunchback. As for the esophagus, it must be injured, and maybe there is a little perforation. How do you feel now? There seems to be something in the chest. Chest pain? Difficulty swallowing? That's right, it's stuck. But there is no cough, phlegm, vomiting blood, or difficulty breathing. Indicating that this thing did not puncture the trachea, and the large blood vessel connected to the heart did not bleed heavily. He pointed at the illusion in front of him and tried to keep it simple. However, the more he talked, the paler the old hunchback became, and finally he was about to collapse. Your Excellency, Pastor, please tell me how to treat it. I will listen to you. I will listen to whatever you say. Even if you have to cut open your chest and take out this thing, I will listen to you. Nonsense. Without waiting for Greet to reply, Elder Gushan shouted loudly. Are you a necromancer? Gretel, rightward arrow. Rightward arrow. Although I am not a necromancer, your words always sound strange. Well, it's not necessary to have a large chest opening, at least in this situation, it's not necessary yet. When Greet was just working, if he encountered such a troublesome esophageal foreign body, he might indeed need a thoracotomy. But now, with esophagoscopy, thoracoscopy, and an aortic stent graft as backup, everything is done. During the operation period, intraoperative bleeding is less and postoperative recovery is faster. Unless it is too late when you come for treatment, the inside is perforated, inflamed, suppurated, and adhesions are in a mess, and it is too close to the aorta and cannot be removed by the endoscopic device, otherwise, there is really no need to perform a major removal. In other words, the advancement of medical technology is not just for the benefit of patients. It's not that scary, he smiled, comforted the old hunchback, and quietly threw a remove fear. Alas, I have become depraved. Now when communicating with patients, I have learned to be lazy and directly resort to magic to comfort. Greet silently reflected on his laziness while controlling the phantom to explain to the old hunchback. That's it? The next method we will use is to induce vines to enter from your mouth, reach the esophagus, and directly take out the foreign body. A green vine stretches into the mouth and goes straight down in the translucent esophagus, wrapping around the half spoon outlined by the phantom. In order to be able to see the foreign object during the operation, we also need to place a secret eye and a light source. Of course, since this spoon may penetrate the aorta, we also need to make a small hole in your chest. Greet opened his right index finger and thumb to mark a width of 0.5 centimeters, indicating that only such a small hole was needed. Put another vine in. If the aorta is injured, treat it as soon as possible when pulling out the foreign object. The second and third virtual vines, one wrapped in the secret eye and the other wrapped in a ball of light, extend from top to bottom into the esophagus. The fourth, fifth, and sixth vines entered the chest, and the secret eye lit up another field of vision. The old hunchback stared blankly and listened to Greet say. Of course, considering that even if there is damage to the aorta, it will be very small, we have another plan. Without drilling a hole in the chest, directly prepare for the treatment, and pull out the foreign body and release it immediately. As long as the operation is fast enough and the cooperation is good enough, it will not too much bleeding. Then don't dig holes, the old hunchback shouted impatiently. After calling out, fearing to offend Gretel, he cautiously glanced at him. Your Excellency, I am older, and I am less courageous. Sticking a few vines into your mouth is okay, but drilling holes in your chest sounds really scary. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. Asking for various. Thanks to Ed for the 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to Ed Chin Menglio for the 500 starting coin reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 438. Sit up straight. Sit up straighter. Tilt your head up. Open your mouth wide. Open it wide with force. Okay, stay still. Cirella. Confinement. After a wave of high-intensity training in lung washing, esophagoscopy, etc., Gretel was not afraid at all. Let the old hunchback sit up, raise his head, open his mouth, and inhale as much as possible. Cirella slapped the confinement technique, and Greet wiped off a drop of sweat, and slapped the old hunchback on the throat. Local anesthesia to eliminate the pharyngeal reflex. The operation begins. 3 vines go hand in hand, going down together. Using vines to make an esophagoscope is much more convenient than the one in the previous life. The average diameter of the esophagus was 2 cm. The outer diameter of the esophagoscope in the previous life was generally 9 mm. If it was slightly crooked or used a little more force, it could be punctured. The posterior wall of the esophagus penetrates directly into the chest cavity. And what about the vines Gretel used? Less than 1 mm in diameter. Even if 3 vines are put together, the diameter is less than 3 mm, and the error tolerance is much higher than that of an esophagoscope. Moreover, it is also easy to operate. Greet stared closely at the arcane eye screen. The scene on the screen kept rotating, from the bottom of the mouth, the base of the tongue, the palate, down around the epiglottis, and under the bright light, there was an entrance that was constantly opening and closing. The silver dragon girl stood behind him and looked at him with good eyes. When she saw the entrance, she immediately shouted in joy. Gretel! Here! Sarala, this is the trachea, what we want to enter now is the esophagus. Greet replied slightly helplessly. As he spoke, he controlled the vine bundle to branch out and gently lifted up the cricoid cartilage. The camera rotated, and under the light source, another hidden hole appeared, and the secret eye plunged into it. Sarara followed Greet and had seen more than one laparoscopic surgery, but this time it was different. In the past, the vines ran along the trachea, which was supported by cricoid cartilage and would not change its shape. The esophagus is different. With the movement of inhalation and exhalation, it keeps expanding and peristalsis. It contracts and relaxes, relaxes and contracts again. The changes don't stop for a moment. Didn't I use the confinement technique? Sarara whispered. My fingertips were flipping, eager to try, wanting to try again. Gretel coughed. Don't move. As for the confinement technique, or the tranquility technique of the god of war temple, or the principles of similar spells, he has not yet understood them. The pain of cutting off the central nerve is definitely there, the control of muscle movement is about control. The movement of voluntary muscles can be controlled, but the movement of involuntary muscles cannot be controlled. Otherwise, like when a tube of muscle relaxant is administered during general anesthesia, the lungs will not be able to breathe on their own first, and a ventilator must be used to supply oxygen. Control it to this extent, use a magical technique, and kill a person. The secret eye moves like clouds and water, constantly downwards. Greet controlled the mana output, estimated that the vines had penetrated 20 centimeters, and slowed down. 21 centimeters, 22 centimeters, 23 centimeters, a reflection suddenly flew up from the light screen, causing him to squint slightly. I see it, Sarala cheered. I saw it, Elder Gushan held his breath. I saw it. White Wolfgen's eyes widened, and his big hairy hand subconsciously covered his mouth, for fear of making any sound. As for the old hunchback's young apprentice, the young man had already collapsed to the ground, trembling. Gretel took a deep breath. Looking carefully on the screen, you can see a broken spoon head on the esophagus at the 7 o'clock and 11 o'clock directions, with the 7 o'clock direction piercing the esophageal wall. The length of the embedded part is unknown, but the secret eye moves from side to side. There is not much bleeding on the esophageal wall, and there are no signs of tearing. It should be fine? Sarala, prepare the healing technique, Gretel ordered in a deep voice. The silver dragon girl took a step forward, and a ball of white light lit up on her fingertips, rising and shrinking. Gretel glanced at her, and the vine in his hand suddenly grew in size, branched out into thousands of strands, and stretched out around the esophageal wall. The broken spoon broke away from the esophageal wall and was immediately wrapped in a thin vine, tightly wrapped tightly. The secret eye turned to the esophageal wall, and Gretel carefully observed the light screen. He saw that the esophageal mucosa punctured by the broken spoon showed erosion and congestion, but no obvious perforation or active bleeding. Well, from the looks of it, the aorta at the back should be fine. His mind moved slightly, and he condensed a ball of healing magic, which landed on the damaged part of the esophagus. After that, he exited the vine all the way and treated him all the way. After a while, the vine wrapped the broken spoon and exited the mouth and threw it out. Finish. Very good, with healing skills to clean up the battlefield, saving countless troubles. Gretel clapped his hands, feeling relaxed. If this happened in the previous life, the next step would be to insert a gastric tube, fight infection, give rehydration and other supportive treatments. Seeing that the esophageal problem was no longer serious, the gastric tube was removed on the second day and the patient was allowed to take liquid food. After 5 or 7 days, the incision healed well, and the patient was released from the hospital. Healing is a good thing. After calling Sarala to release the restraint, Greed took the broken spoon with the hand of the mage and brought it to the old hunchback with a smile. Although he was fully confident that no damage was caused during the operation, he still had to ask. "How do you feel? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" Thump. The old man knelt down in admiration. "Hey, don't." Greet looked helpless. Alas, this is the disadvantage of the confinement technique. In his previous life, it would have taken half an hour from the moment he woke up from anesthesia until the patient was able to move without any hindrance, so he wouldn't have to kneel down in front of him. After some persuasive talk, and with the help of 6 powerful mages, he finally got the person up from the ground and asked him to go out. When he looked back, there was nothing behind him. Only he, Sarah and Bernard were left standing among the smoke and grass. Gretel shook his head vigorously. For a moment, I almost thought that I had traveled to a Chinese fairy tale and spent a pleasant night in the ghost fox mansion. When I came out and looked back, there was nothing there. Greet, what are you doing in a daze? Do you still need to use the escape cabin? Well, I forgot about this. Gretel returned to the caravan and immersed himself in writing and recording medical records. Sarala stayed aside quietly, copied a copy of his CT records, turned over them, and studied them diligently. Halfway through the study, I suddenly heard Bernard's voice outside. "What's up?" "We are here to say thank you." The old hunchback's voice sounded again, in a low voice, as if to laugh. "There are not many good things in this small village. These are some treasures that I have accumulated over the years and are dedicated to the healer. In addition, I have something to ask for." "Boss." Bernard turned to the car and asked for instructions. Greet finished writing a sentence quickly, opened the curtain, and climbed out of the car. Looking up, he saw that the wooden box in the old hunchback's hand was full of bits and pieces of animal teeth, bones, bird claws, fish bones. Forget about this kind of thing. He himself is of no use." He turned on Detect Magic and took a look. It was not a magic material. Greet turned his head and saw that the silver dragon girl had an expressionless face and raised her eyes to the sky, obviously looking down on her. He thought for a while. "Old man, these things of yours are of no use to my treatment and research." Seeing the old hunchback's face darken, he quickly pointed to Bernard and spoke faster. "However, I have always wanted to get this follower a mount suitable for his abilities. I am not familiar with the North. Elder, do you have any suggestions? Your follower is an amazing warrior." The hunchback Whitefin squinted his eyes, looked at Bernard carefully, and said in a deep voice. "Such a warrior should have a mount worthy of him. A horse with the blood of the devil, a giant wolf that swallows ice, or a stag with a back higher than a human shoulder. Only such monsters are qualified to be followed by you. The one who rides a 1-ton Shire horse? Winter wolf, frost wolf? Moose?" Greet searched through his meager knowledge of zoology and warcraft, and found several targets from his memory bank. "It sounds like these mounts can carry Bernard. So the question is, where can I find it? Lord Healer, when you get to Akula, there will be many tribesmen who hunt monsters or tame mounts to show off their strength." The old hunchback then gave the answer. "At that time, I will definitely use the strength of the entire clan to seek opportunities for your followers." "That's good." Gretel sighed gratefully. God knows, he really has had enough of the days when he rides the magic horse and the phantom pony, and Bernard follows him on 2 legs. If any of your tribe members are suffering from any illness and need my help, please feel free to ask." "That's great." The old hunchback's eyes lit up. He raised his right hand, twisted it, and moved it hard around to the left side of his back. "To tell you the truth, this thing has been bothering me for many years. I have used medicine, spells, and various methods to treat it, and I have also sought help from many therapists. However, it either doesn't work, and the skin ulcers. Or, the more treatment, the worse it gets." He bowed down respectfully, his head almost level with his knees. "Dear healer, Your miraculous methods have once again ignited my hope. I sincerely ask you to relieve my pain. Okay, the Silver Dragon girl's thin voice came over immediately. Finally, she didn't yell, but cast a spell to transmit the sound into Gretel's ears at a certain point. The tone was cheerful and full of excitement. It's rare that he comes to the door on his own. Gretel, treat him. I also want to treat him. But. Gretel sighed. He squinted his eyes and silently looked at the thick record book in the Silver Dragon girl's hand. Since the old man said that thing will grow, then priority should be given to various tumors. Then, whether it is fibroma, lipoma, hemangioma, or various other benign and malignant tumors. In terms of examination methods, CT cannot always be escaped. Gretel tentatively asked the old hunchback. If we want safe treatment, today's detection spell will have to be performed again, and it may take 10 times more time than today. How about you wait, we arrive at the gathering, and wait until I contract an incorporeal body. Please agree. You must agree. With all his conscience, he really doesn't want to do it again today, such a large scanning range. What do you think is the best choice for Bernard's mount? P.S. 3,000 words. 6,000 words today. Completed the first update successfully. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, and ask for all kinds of things. This case refers to experiences in the diagnosis and treatment of one case of thoracic aortic stent graft endoluminal isolation combined with endoscopic esophageal foreign body removal. Thanks to Etling Luokangshuang for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. Hey, dear friends who use Apple phones, if it's convenient, please give rewards from the web page. Apple charges a lot of money and it's 3 months late. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jialan 2020. Chapter 439. As Greet wished, the old hunchback declined the treatment, or in other words, he requested that the treatment be postponed to a later date, and promised that he would do his best to help Greet obtain a suitable incorporeal body. Greet understood. After all, not everyone is willing to try a second time in the short term after sitting stiffly on the CT chair for nearly 2 hours, almost unable to hold it in any longer. The two teams formed one team, swaying and marching in the wilderness. Along the way, a third village and a fourth village were merged. Gretel was introduced to the headmen and elders of each village, and then received a dozen requests for help, including but not limited to, my horse has lost its appetite, my horse is not walking well, my horse. By the way, I chatted up a large group of barbarians for a physical examination, measured their height and weight, and used detection magic to take X-rays. All in all, I was having a great time, and I had a sense of accomplishment that I felt when I was sent to the hospital to go to the countryside in my previous life. Half a month passed by in a flash. Finally, they arrived at Akula, the scene of the tribal gathering. Gretel got out of the caravan, stood up straight, and immediately froze on the spot, slowly opening his mouth. At the edge of the camp, as far as the eye can see, a huge arch stands, at least 5 meters high. The arch was not made of masonry, bamboo, or the inflatable materials that were common in Gretel's previous life, but the skeleton of some kind of giant beast. The surface of the bone is light yellow in color and full of luster. There is an animal head high on the top of the arch, with a huge mouth open, fangs intertwined, and wisps of light red can be seen in the bones. It was clear at a glance that they were not old, weathered animal bones, but fresh bones. The ferocious beast had been killed not long ago. Further inside, clusters of small tents surround large tents and are scattered on the wasteland. There are dozens of ropes tied to the top of each big tent, with colorful flags tied to them, blowing in the wind. The taller the tent, the more ropes and colorful flags. The men and women who came in and out of the tent looked more energetic, and their clothes became more. Greet shook his head. He really couldn't see how the barbarians' clothes were luxurious, but at least they weren't shabby. The animal claws and teeth hanging on the chest are also extremely long and sharp. In short, it should look like a very powerful village or tribe. The garrison locations of these tribes do not seem to be on a first-come, first-served basis, but rather have their own set of rules. Elder Gushan and the others walked in familiarly, pitched a tent near the center of the settlement, and enthusiastically built a residence for Greet and the others. Bernard wanted to help, but they stopped him. What? Let the guests and the noble spellcasters do it themselves? Non-existent. Bernard couldn't even get involved, so Greet was even more idle and simply went out with Cyrilla and Bernard to see what was going on. After walking around half a circle, I suddenly saw a crowd of people in front of me, huddled together in a dark mass. Greet approached curiously, stretched his neck and looked for a moment, then stood up on tiptoes. What is that man doing? There is a big stone standing on the hill in front. It is as tall as two people and square. It looks particularly eye-catching. When Greet walked over, there was a barbarian with a big beard and 3 sets of fangs standing high on the stone, waving his arms and full of momentum. Article 10, if a man in a family is killed, the victim's family has the right to take revenge, tooth for tooth, never ending. Article 11, if a family's house burns down, the neighbors must help rebuild it. If a family's cow dies of illness and is lost, the neighbor must use his own cow to make up for half of the family's loss. Article 12, arsonists shall be tied to a burning pillar and burned to death. Article 13, anyone who murders an elder will be hung next to a live wolf that is also hung until death. Article 14, those who betray their compatriots will be quartered by 5 horses or dragged to death by wild horses. There was a group of barbarians gathered in front of the stone. They all looked older and their furs were thicker and glossier. Behind them, another group of people gathered around a little further away. They were younger and stood more scattered, whispering to each other. Greet squeezed past them and pushed forward, letting Bernard hold him back. Don't go there. Those people are gaudy. Gaudy. Gretel turned his head blankly. Bernard explained in a low voice. Gaudy are elders, wise men, those who are highly virtuous, generous, kind, and respected. When the tribe encounters disputes, they mediate. The Gaudy above is running for the position of explainer, that is he who explains the law to everyone. Oh, explain the law. Gretel nodded. Judging from his impassioned and spitting appearance, he does seem to be campaigning. Gretel was reminded of some unpleasant memories and asked in a low voice. Why is he just memorizing the law? We are running for election. Don't we have to make promises to everyone? No need, Bernard looked down at him in surprise. The condition for successful election is that he must recite 1/3 of the code from memory in front of everyone. The other Gaudis stood by to ensure that he did not make mistakes. What about this? This approach sounds quite reasonable, especially in the living environment of barbarians. But reciting 1/3 of the code in public? How long is your code of law? If a person wants to succeed in the election, do we have to stand here for a day? Article 21, if a free man loses all his land, he can become a slave. If a slave serves his master loyally, he will be given the opportunity to redeem himself and become a free man. Article 22, those who violate the law will be expelled from the tribe. The exiles cannot cultivate any land, and cannot accept gifts or help from anyone. When I got here, the cheers from below started. First, the Gaudis in the front row applauded enthusiastically, and then the barbarians in the back row raised their arms, waved their fists, and cheered. Those who speak the truth. Those who speak the truth. Those who speak the truth. What, there are only 22 articles, which is 1/3 of the code. Is your codex so short? Any magician, no, any mage apprentice, can memorize this level of code without any difficulty, right? Gretel came to his senses. He looked at the new speaker's exposed arms and well-developed biceps, and wanted to know whether the barbarian speaker relied on words to explain the law, or whether he relied on muscles to explain the law physically. After Gothi's successful election, 2 more people came to power one after another to run for election as speakers. It's a pity that the last 2 people's memory is beyond words. They made many mistakes without memorizing the 10 points, and were booed off the stage mercilessly. Gretel lost interest after listening for a while. Cyrilla was even more impatient than him. She held him with one hand, waved at Bernard with the other, and continued moving forward in a circle. After walking 50 or 60 steps, I heard the sound of water rushing in front of me. A large group of people kept running along the river bank, shouting as they ran. "Work harder! Work harder! 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 Overtake this guy! You can do it! Hold on! Hold on, ouch! He's sinking! Do you want to save someone?" Then there was plop, 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 and a large group of people jumped into the water. Someone drowned? Gretel suddenly quickened his pace. As his feet suddenly left the ground, the wind roared in his ears, but Bernard picked up his collar very skillfully and flew forward. Just, so skillful that it makes people feel distressed. When I ran closer, I saw that the drowning man had been fished out. He was holding the water upside down and patting him on the back. Greet observed for a moment and saw that the guy coughed up water quickly and regained consciousness, so he didn't go up to cause trouble. Soon, 7 or 8 more barbarians jumped down with shields on their backs and battle axes tied to their backs. A new weight-bearing swimming competition begins. Gretel cancelled cold and heat resistance, stretched out his hand to test the temperature of the air, and quickly added it to himself. As for the water temperature of the river, he was not even interested in reaching out and touching it. It's the end of autumn and the beginning of winter. Even if it's not freezing today, it's getting close. But Bernard's eyes lit up. He was gearing up, eager to try, and had already begun to pull off his leather jacket. "Boss, can I also go down and compete? Swimming with weights. Haven't competed in a long time. When he was in the tribe before, he came first every time." You can go if you want." Before Gretel could say a word, Cyrilla on the right side excitedly stuck her head in and interjected. "Gretel! I'm going too." "Don't go," Greet held her tightly. "How can you, a silver dragon, compare with them? If you win the competition, everyone will be disgraced. If you lose the competition, will you show up in the form of a silver dragon in public? Do it again." "Cyrilla, I'm here to treat them and find the contracted incorporeal body. I need your help. Don't go away." Cyrilla reluctantly stopped. Greet waved to Bernard, telling him to have fun, and continued walking with Cyrilla. Along the way there are various competition venues, including those for throwing javelins, wrestling, unarmed fighting, and fighting with weapons and armor. The liveliest circle was packed with people and roaring loudly. Greet finally squeezed into the center, but there was a barbarian holding a shield in his left hand, with his right hand free, fighting a snow-white giant wolf that was at least 1.5 meters tall at the shoulders and over 3 meters long. The giant wolf roared, bit, and spewed ice. It was majestic and majestic. It was clearly a monster of a high level. The barbarian either dodged or blocked with his shield. If he couldn't dodge, he was hit by the breath, and his legs and feet were immediately frozen in the ice. The giant wolf roared. However, the barbarian broke the ice at the last moment and dodged to the side. Then, he stretched out his left arm, grabbed the giant wolf's neck hair, pressed it down, and punched it hard with his right fist. The fists crashed down with a roar. The giant wolf went from roaring to struggling, from struggling to whining, and finally, its tail was held low between its 2 hind legs. The barbarian stopped his fists, turned over and mounted on the wolf's back. The giant wolf did not resist, but obeyed, and was driven around the field by the barbarian. I feel like you can choose a mount here, Greet's eyes lit up. Hey, if I call Bernard over, can he tame a mount here? Or, do you want me to heal a few people first in exchange for some points or something? Are you a healer? Someone beside him suddenly interrupted. Gretel turned his head and saw a white-haired old man looking at him with a smile, holding a bone staff with a few bunches of dried plant fruits hanging on the top of the staff. Young healer, if you wish to communicate, our camp is on the other side. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @OB for the 100 book coins reward. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 440. The treatment of spellcasters is obviously more than one level higher than that of ordinary barbarians. The host tribe specially set up a large house for them, located in the heart of Akula, in the center of the host village. The exterior walls of the house were painted a striking white, and there was a hall in the middle with dozens of desks scattered around. There are several small rooms arranged around the hall, and there are walkways leading to the back. Gretel glanced at it and thought in his mind. Outpatient hall, Clinic 1, Clinic 2, Clinic 3. The hall was filled with smoke. The table is filled with all kinds of food and drinks. Behind the table, the fur on the couch is so thick and soft that you won't want to get up when you lie down on it. The spellcasters, or in other words, the elders and wise men of each village, were eating, drinking, and talking in front of their desks and couches. Oh, and they smoke. Not necessarily all tobacco leaves. In fact, Gretel only smelled a little nicotine in the room full of smoke, probably because of poverty. God knows what they were burning. In short, since ancient times, humans have been innovating in smoking materials. What sesame leaves, papaya leaves, lotus leaves, wild rice leaves. Also, corn cobs and the like. But no matter what, PM 2.5, oh no, PM 10, the index is very high. Gretel quickly used a bubble technique for himself. He calmly entered despite the bubbles. Suddenly, eyes from all directions were focused on him. Who is this? I don't know him, I've never seen him, he's not from our tribe, not from any tribe. Young, still human, with a young and beautiful elf by his side? His doubtful eyes fell on Gretel, then followed his arm and landed on the head of the oak staff in his hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 green leaves. Most of the spellcasters turned their heads and nodded to Gretel, expressing either strong or weak kindness. In the center of the inside of the hall, an old man wearing a feather crown and a snow-white feather cloak stood up with a smile and opened his arms. Young spellcasters, young elves, welcome you. No matter where you are from, Akula welcomes any friends with good intentions. Please enjoy everything here, treat this place as your own home, and make the guests feel being restrained means that the master has lost his honor. Well, there is no need to take honor so seriously. Greet leaned on the oak staff and bowed slightly in return. I am a traveler from afar. I heard that there are many brilliant healers here, so I came here to travel and gain more knowledge. Please give me a seat so that I can listen to the experiences of the elders. Haha, it's easy to talk. The old man Yuguan raised his hand, and someone immediately added a table and couch to his right, and arranged for Greet and the others to sit down. There were envious looks from all around. It was obvious that this arrangement was a complete VIP treatment. Then, barbecue, stew, bread, and wine were placed on the table one after another, showing off the hospitality. There was even a pile of fruits that were rare in the wilderness, specially placed in front of Cyrilla, obviously to entertain Miss Elf. Gretel smiled and nodded to the old man in thanks, then pricked up his ears to listen to their chat. As a tribal elder, he knows more or less some healing techniques, but his ideas are different from those of priests and medical magicians, and are quite strange. Gretel was listening, and it was really eye-opening. If a tumor slides under your finger, it's a sarcoma and you can treat it with fire. If the tumor is as hard as a rock, obviously you're going to have to use a knife to fix it. If soldiers are bitten in the wild and cannot come back for a while, I tell them that you can make a mixture of oil, honey, and roasted wheat flour, apply it to the wound, and then cover it with fresh meat. Wait until the meat, if it is no longer fresh, it must be replaced. Gretel was frightened by all the strange thoughts. He tried hard to keep a low profile and not argue with these healers. He listened and looked around. By the way, how high are the spellcasting levels of these people? Unlike priests who wear rank marks, and magicians who wear badges, the barbarian spellcasters are all dressed up in different styles, and at a glance, it's impossible to tell their level. From their dressing up, we can only roughly understand the spells they are good at, or the source of their natural power. Some wear feather cloaks, some wear antlers on their heads, some have beast tusks or raptor claws hanging under their necks, and some wear a bronze mirror on their chest and a string of bells on their skirts. Bear skins, wolf skins, leopard skins, deer skins, feathers, all kinds, enough to open a herbarium. Hey, young healer, what type of healing techniques are you good at? Suddenly, the voice of the old man Yuguan interrupted Gretel's thoughts. Gretel came back to his senses, lowered his head respectfully, and answered softly. I have a special method that allows me to roughly see what's going on inside the human body and perform treatments based on the observations. Although I don't know what level this old man is, the feather crown he wears on his head seems to come from the feathers of a level 15 magical creature, the lightning eagle. This alone deserves his caution and respect. Besides, there are records in the council that among the barbarians, there are also strong men above level 15, even legendary level. Otherwise, even in such a bitter cold place, they would not be able to occupy it peacefully. Slave traders would have already come knocking on their door. Oh. Real. Tisk tisk. There was a slight commotion in the hall. Observing the inside of the human body is the ability that every healer dreams of. Although there are many spellcasters in the hall who can call upon the power of nature and treat injuries and illnesses, they still hope to have a way to understand the conditions inside the human body. After all, in many cases, they can only rely on guessing. The old man with feather crown coughed hard. There was silence in the hall. Only Gretel continued to state with a smile at the old man's signal. Of course, this kind of observation is quite rough and has many limitations. So I came here this time to find some ways to enhance my detection capabilities. For example, I contract a totem spirit and let it become my eyes to explore the inside of the human body. There was another round of whispering in the hall. This time, the old man Yuguan did not stop him. He thought for a moment and raised his hand to Gretel. Totem spirits are not our subordinates or property, but our comrades and partners who have been fighting side by side for many years. Young spellcaster, if you want to take away a totem spirit, you must prove your goodwill and value. I don't intend to ask for it empty-handed. Gretel nodded naturally. No problem. So what do I need to do? The people of the Black Gate God welcome all friends. Before you came, Gushan and Whitefin recommended you, saying that you have helped a lot of our people and have good intentions towards us. The old man looked majestic and said in a calm voice. Young healer, first of all, we hope to see if your healing ability is worthy of our partner. Well, a very reasonable request. But Greet looked left and right. Where was the patient? Where are the wounded? Not necessarily. In order to test my healing ability, why don't you give me a leg to treat at a discount? The way he looked around, His thoughts were almost written on his face. The old man in Yiguan couldn't help laughing and smiled. You don't have to look for it. Children will always come up with something to do in such a conference. As long as you sit here, after a while, the wounded will definitely be brought over. Well, take this opportunity to introduce yourself. I am Brock from the Eagle Department. What is your name, and where are you from? Greet Nordmark, from Nevis. Greet answered honestly. Just as we were about to exchange a few more words, a soldier suddenly rushed in from outside the hall and shouted from a distance. Great Elder, help! Bunker is full again. Eating too much. Let him vomit after eating enough, Elder Brock said angrily. Gretel noticed that he glanced at her secretly. His gaze was very subtle. Maybe, you think it's too embarrassing for you to treat a guy who's overeating? No. He can't spit it out, the soldier replied urgently. He stood on tiptoe, then came down, then stood up again. He was obviously restraining himself from rushing forward and dragging the elder away. He has a severe stomachache and is sweating all the time. I have never seen his face so pale. Elder, Bunker is really in trouble this time. Please save him. I'll go see him. Gretel sighed and stood up. Even if you are overeating, you cannot take it lightly. Overeating will really kill you. Or, it can cause acute gastric dilatation, leading to severe dehydration of the body, reduced effective blood volume, peripheral circulation failure and death. Or, the stomach will be burst, causing septic shock and death. Or, eating a large amount of food at one time may lead to acute pancreatitis, which will be painful to death. In his previous life, he had treated a patient who was a big eater who was a mukbang practitioner. When it was delivered, it was said that I had just eaten 20 burgers in one go. Anyway, after that operation, the doctors, nurses, and anesthesiologists in the operating room didn't order hamburgers for a month. Then bring him over, Elder Brock sighed. Soon, a tall and strong warrior with long arms and legs was carried in with a whole bear skin. He was naked from the waist up, lying on his back, and there was a lot of oil from his mouth to his chest. Her belly was swollen, like a pregnant woman who was 10 months pregnant. Elder Brock only glanced at him and turned his head with a dark face. Lord Newardmark. Greet squatted over without him opening his mouth. First look at the face, pale, with cold sweat, lips a little white, no cyanosis. Look at the eyes again. They are flexible and can move with others. Well, the mind seems to be awake. To be on the safe side, he threw proficient in language to the other party. He touched his forehead, stretched out his hand to feel his pulse, and asked in a low voice. May I have your name? Bunker. The warrior on the ground struggled to answer. At the same time, Elder Brock responded. His name is Bunker. Didn't you just say that? Is this young healer distracted or something? SHH, Gretel whispered to stop him. It's a physical examination, don't interfere. Well, the patient can answer calls and his own name. Gretel silently made a note in the little notebook in his heart. He is conscious and in good spirits. The abdomen is obviously distended, but the body temperature and heartbeat are still normal. So how much did you eat? Just half a deer. Greet's vision went dark. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 441. Bunker, right? Age. Warrior level. How big is a deer? Gretel asked as he inspected it. Well, the breathing rate is 20 plus times/min, no rowels are heard during cardiopulmonary auscultation, the abdomen is obviously distended, there is tenderness in the upper abdomen, no rebound tenderness, and no other obvious positive signs. You said you ate half a deer. How big was the deer? The person Gretel had seen in his life who ate the most food in a single time was probably Bernard. At the first meal when they met, Bernard ate most of a roast chicken and a whole roast lamb, one leg of lamb was missing, in one go. By the way, he also drank a barrel of beer. Then, Gretel watched helplessly as his abdomen was as flat as ever, without any bulge at all. He didn't know where those things went, but from a clinical point of view, the fact that the abdomen was not bulging meant that the digestive system had not lost its ability to peristalsis and digestion, and its working functions were completely normal. So Mr. Bunker, how high is your warrior level, which roughly determines your food intake and digestion capacity, and how big can the deer you eat be? Bunk, 26 years old, intermediate fighter. The deer is about this big. Someone next to him answered. When it came to the size of the deer, I got stuck for a moment, then stretched out my hand to make gestures. Greet looked up in his busy schedule and couldn't figure out the point. So how big is it? Gretel's concept of deer was still ingrained in his mind, and he directly used the Sika deer as a template. It didn't seem to be particularly big, at least, it seemed inferior to the largest goat he had ever seen in his life. As powerful as Bernard was when he ate a whole roasted lamb, he didn't think Bunker could stay on the ground after eating half a Sika deer. And, what level is an intermediate warrior? Compared with Bernard, are you stronger or weaker? Bernard. Bernard, come over here and see if you can beat him. Forget it, no one answered. Bernard was probably still swimming with weights and didn't follow him. Greet shouted without looking back. Cyrilla, look at this Bunker, who is stronger compared to Bernard. Is there any difference? The Silver Dragon girl's voice was vague, as if she was chewing something. You can't beat me anyway. I thank you. Of course, I would definitely not dare to say this. First of all, he can't beat Miss Silver Dragon, not in all aspects. Secondly, Bunker's warrior level must be above level 5, and the endless ink pen cannot be displayed after trying it, so. Cyrilla, lend me your forehead ornament. Alas, if it hurts like this, there is a certain chance of perforation. Plain X-rays can still be used to detect perforation and intestinal obstruction. As for other conditions, CT is generally relied upon. However, now that the abdomen is swollen like this and the stomach is full of contents, it has almost changed from a hollow organ to a solid organ. I can probably still take a look at the shape. Wow! Greet couldn't help but sigh. Cyrilla heard the sound and came closer. Gretel waved to her and pointed at the patient's abdomen. This is the first time I've seen this. Look, the diaphragm is pushed up to the 8th rib, and the lower part has reached the pelvis. Wow! Really? Cyrilla poked half of her head out from behind him, glanced at him, and immediately exclaimed. Brock, the old man with a feather crown, also stepped forward and took a look, but said nothing. As soon as he moved, the barbarian elders came up in a big circle, all looking around. Where? Don't you see how bloated your belly is? The whole belly is occupied. I saw it on my belly. How did it show up on my chest? This is what he said. Is there some special way to see inside the human body? Can we learn it? I don't know, but he wants a totem beast. If we propose an exchange, maybe we can learn from it, right? Gretel turned a deaf ear. He concentrated and continued the examination. Well, the gastric cavity and esophagus were significantly dilated, and a large fluid level was seen in them, which suggested pyloric obstruction. The stomach, the sign of gastric perforation on plain X-rays was a crescent-shaped free gas under the diaphragm, but Gray, look at the stomach. Not to mention the diaphragm, where is there room in the entire abdominal cavity? Forget it, let's do gastrointestinal decompression as soon as possible. Bunker, turn your head to one side and open your mouth as wide as possible. Cyrilla, confine it. I'll do a gastroscopy. Greet ordered while manually breaking off his head. Fortunately, Bunker was also very cooperative. He glanced at the old man with feather crowns, saw him nodding slightly, and turned his head to the side obediently. Gretel summoned a floating saucer, and asked people to lift the stretcher up and place it on the floating saucer, and then summoned vines. The almighty vine travels through the mouth, through the esophagus, and into the stomach. The esophagus was about to come to an end, and soon Gretel frowned. Can't make it through. The vine, no, the vine version of the gastroscope, can't get through it. On the light screen, the lower section of the esophagus changed from healthy pink to bright red, representing inflammation, and it expanded and trembled violently. Inflammation of the lower end of the esophagus, spasm of the cardiac lumen of the lower end of the esophagus. Gastroscope cannot be inserted. Gretel reluctantly let the vine grow a little thicker, and tried to attract it, but only a small amount of liquid was sucked out, which was not enough. He frowned, stood up and looked around. There's only one way. What? Open the stomach and take out the contents. The hall suddenly became quiet. The elders of each village and tribe looked at me and I looked at you, their faces were ugly. After many years of treating tribesmen, they would sometimes cut off a piece of flesh, drill a hole in the head, or perform an incision on an arm or leg. However, the success rate of opening a stomach is. Although there are treatments to support the patient, there will be sudden surges of blood, and the treatments cannot keep up. They may seem cured, but then die inexplicably a few days later. There are all kinds of situations. Over time, no one will take the initiative to disembowel someone unless absolutely necessary. Are you sure? The voice of the old man Yuguan was still calm. As the most powerful high-level healer within 1,000 miles, he naturally has a way to deal with stupid things like overstuffing. With the confidence in his heart, he had time to look at Gretel's methods. It's always good to have more treatment methods, right? I am not particularly sure. Greet pondered for a moment. The suction of gastric contents alone is fine, but the treatment of gastric perforation is more problematic. If there is another piece of necrosis, it will be a headache. But if he is left alone, he will be dead. Not particularly sure, but somewhat certain. Elder Brock nodded, very good. If he really had to open his stomach, the probability of him saving the person is not particularly high. The young pastor didn't do all the big things and just boasted, which is great. If you are willing, you can give it a try. Of course, if it doesn't succeed, the totem spirit will have nothing to do with you. Okay. Then, please give me a quiet, clean place, and I will take care of you. Cyrilla, shelter hut. Did you hear that? Stay back, the loud voice of the old man with feather crown sounded. Soon, the shelter cabin unfolded and enveloped Gretel, Sarah, the patient who was lying on the bed, and Elder Brock. Then, the old man Yuguan saw the servant of the god of nature shrinking the oak staff and putting it in his chest pocket. He raised his hand and summoned a skeleton. You. There's nothing I can do. Gretel turned to him and gave him a grimace. I can't cut it. Sarah burst out laughing from behind. Greet busily scrubbed the patient, prepared skin, and spread drapes. 7 or 8 mage hands flew up at the same time, shook out 4 dark green sterile sheets, spread them on all sides, and then covered them with a whole towel. A few pieces of cloth were covered with it, and in the eyes of the healer, all that was left of a large living person was a bulging abdomen. Then, Gretel stood on the side of the operating table, handed the scalpel to the silver skeleton, and threw a demonized weapon on the knife. Greet closed her eyes and concentrated. The silver skull held the knife steadily and slashed with one stroke. Sure enough, the silver skeleton and demonized weapon and dwarf special scalpel is invincible and unstoppable. With just one knife, a 20 centimeters long incision was made in the middle of the mid-level warrior Bunker's upper abdomen. Gretel held his breath and manipulated the silver skull to disembowel it layer by layer. With your belly bulging like this, You can easily scratch the underlying organs if you're not careful, so you need to be extra careful. The peritoneum was opened, and the four mages' hands turned into flat hook shapes, pulling outward slightly. The obviously expanded stomach wall immediately bulged out impatiently. So big. Cyrilla let out a small breath. She also flew up four mage hands and took over the work of pulling the hook, so that Gretel would not be distracted. Greet observed carefully that the stomach wall under the shadowless lamp was almost purple-black. He didn't know whether it was due to ischemia or because the stomach wall was stretched too thin, so he could see the color of the stomach contents. Fortunately, the operation was done quickly, otherwise. He sighed, manipulated the silver skull, and made a 2-centimeter incision on the stomach wall, and the vines followed closely. This time, there was no need to attract him. The airflow hissed out from the hollow vine, and soon, dark red gastric juice and food residue also poured out. "Get a basin and catch it," Gretel shouted. He cut off the spirit controlling the skeleton himself and threw a wind magic at the opening of the vine. The funnel-shaped whirlwind rotates rapidly, forming a negative pressure that gives the stomach contents the impetus to move forward. Attract. 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 Greet carefully controlled the power of negative pressure suction. It can't be too slow, because the pressure in the patient's stomach is so high. If it's slower, more gastric contents will flow out from the perforation. It can't be too fast, because if the pressure is decompressed too quickly, problems with the heart, lungs, and blood pressure will follow. This is the same principle as ascites cannot be drained out too much at one time and urinary catheterization cannot be conducted too much at one time. As for the things drawn from the vines falling into the floating saucer, emitting a sour stench, Gretel was no longer in the mood to pay attention to this kind of thing. Control the vines, control the whirlwind, and from time to time, throw in a blood oxygen test, or throw in an electrocardiogram to check the heart rate. Thick beads of sweat quickly broke out from his forehead. Finally, Bunker's bulging belly deflated visibly. In the floating dish, there was a thick basin of stomach contents, which was estimated to be at least 4,000 ml. Gretel breathed a sigh of relief and freed up a mage's hand to wipe his sweat. I heard Elder Brock next to me ask. Okay. Okay, Gretel smiled bitterly. It's just the beginning. 3,000 words completed. Another 3,000 words will be written in the afternoon, and another update will be completed. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks at its red eyes, not pink eye. I'll give you 100 starting coins. Thanks to at Artemis for the 100 book coins.